Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Moore, and in this webinar, I'll be talking to you today about the research I have gathered about the use of instructional strategies to support language proficiency and acquisition among English language learners. But first, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. The land I am presenting this webinar is on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. The Anishinaabe include the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. I am grateful to live, learn, research, and enjoy recreational time on these lands as an uninvited guest. I acknowledge the history that many nations hold in the surrounding area and am committed to building relationships with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples towards truth and reconciliation. In this webinar, here are the following topics that we will be covering. So first, we are going to look at the overarching research question, and then we will look at the specific questions, following with what are English language learners, then curriculum connections, why is it important to support English language learners? Next, we'll look at what can educators do to tailor instructional strategies to support English language learners in the language proficiency and acquisition. Then we'll look at how can educators tailor instructional strategies to support English language learners' reading comprehension. And then we will end with the concluding thoughts. To begin, the research is grounded in the question, how can instructional strategies be effectively tailored to improve the language proficiency and academic success of English language learners? Here are some specific questions or emerging themes from the research. So first, we will look at how does the use of differentiated instruction affect the language development of English language learners in various proficiency levels. Then we will look at how can educators tailor instructional strategies to support English language learners' reading comprehension. Next, we'll look at how does the integration of culturally responsive texts and materials impact English language learners' comprehension and engagement in language arts. And finally, we will look at what role do collaborative learning activities play in enhancing English language learners' reading comprehension in language arts. What are English language learners? According to the Ontario Ministry of Education, English language learners, or ELL for short, are defined as students in English language schools whose first language is other than English or is a variety of English that is significantly different from the variety used in Ontario schools, and who may initially require educational interventions to assist them in attaining English language proficiency. They may be Canadian-born or newly arrived from other countries. They may come from diverse backgrounds and school experiences and have a variety of needs. Supporting English language learners' proficiency and acquisition of language is supported by the Ontario curriculum. Specifically, the connection is situated in the strand C, comprehension, understanding and responding to texts. This strand focuses on the integration of word, sentence, and text-level comprehension as students develop comprehension strategies. Comprehension strategies refers to a variety of strategies that students use before, during, and after listening, reading, viewing to construct meaning from texts, including activating and using background and prior knowledge, making predictions, monitoring comprehension, summarizing, and reflecting on their learning. The topic of study is also related to Strand B, Foundations of Language, found in the Ontario curriculum. In this strand, students acquire knowledge and skills relating to foundations of language. The focus is on oral and nonverbal communication, word reading, and spelling. Morphology, vocabulary, fluency, and language conventions. Students develop competence in these building blocks of communication. Research in this presentation highlights word reading and vocabulary from this strand. So comprehension and vocabulary work together in language acquisition and proficiency. Language acquisition refers to the ability to understand and use language with some competency and involves learning grammar, vocabulary, and communication skills. To become more proficient in English, individuals need to comprehend or understand the English language. They also need to communicate effectively through reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Although language proficiency and acquisition requires many skills, in this presentation, I am choosing to focus on the importance of reading comprehension and vocabulary development in supporting English proficiency and acquisition for English language learners. So why is it important to support English language learners? First, we need to consider how many English language learners are in Canada, more specifically, Ontario. So research has shown or found that the first language of approximately 28% of students in Ontario's English language schools is a language other than English. So to read that again, the first language of approximately 28% of the students in Ontario's English language schools, so schools that are English speaking, is a language other than English. Other statistics say that as a 2017 report from People for Education states, 63% of students in Ontario's elementary schools are considered English language learners. In Canada, approximately 34% of all children under the age of 14 speak a language other than English or French as a first language. Often, families who immigrate to Canada may primarily speak another language than English, or very little or none. Children of families who have recently immigrated to Canada may have limited exposure to English, as it may not be spoken in the home. As these percentages are significant and are projected to increase in the upcoming years, educators have a duty to ensure all students, including those who are English language learners, achieve academic success. So what does the research say about English language learners? As educators, we also need to consider what the current research has indicated about English language learners and their experiences of language proficiency and acquisition in relation to their native English learner counterparts. First, research has highlighted that there is a vocabulary gap between English language learners and native English speakers. This gap is substantial because English language learners often do not know many of the simpler words or conversational words that native English learners often require before they enter school or learn in school without explicit teaching. For instance, the extent of English language learners' knowledge of vocabulary is only a fraction of what it is for native speakers of English, and the failure to understand even a few words of text can have negative effects on comprehension. It is clear that English language learners need more vocabulary instruction than their native speaking peers. If a native speaking child enters kindergarten knowing about 5,000 English words, an English language learner with no previous exposure to English enters the same class knowing no English words. It's obvious that the same instruction for each of them will not produce the same results. Everything a teacher of English language learners does should revolve around vocabulary acquisition, explaining, demonstrating, drawing, repeating, reading, writing, and playing with words throughout every aspect of instruction. The disparity between native English learners and English language learners is also evident in studies on reading comprehension. It is estimated that 5 to 15% of native English language learners, school-age children, are poor comprehenders, while the prevalence rate is higher at 10 to 18% among English language learners. The percentage of this reader group is higher for English language learners due to the weaker English vocabulary skills, which lead to reading comprehension problems. Providing specific language support to support English, pardon me, providing specific language support to English language learners is crucial, as learning English is foundational to all other class subjects like math, science, and social studies. Without learning and comprehending English, it negatively impacts English language learners' understanding in all other subjects. It is our duty then, as educators, to support our English language learners to ensure they have equitable access to academic success. We need to use instructional strategies that are tailored to support English language learners' proficiency and acquisition. So what can educators do to tailor instructional strategies to support English language learners in their language proficiency and acquisition? First, we have the differentiation of instructional strategies. So differentiation involves tailoring instructional strategies or main activities to specific subgroups of students rather than a whole class. When differentiating instruction, there are several instructional strategies educators should follow. So it's important to know English language learners' strengths and areas that need further development in English. Teachers often are misled by students' oral proficiency, assuming a corresponding level of reading and writing proficiency. So when teachers assess English language learners, they must include listening, speaking, reading, and writing diagnostics. Another strategy is to set common content objective and differentiate the language objective. Next, we have use yourself rather than a higher level student to serve as a differentiation in the lesson. When teachers consistently pair higher proficiency students with lower proficiency students, particularly English language learners, neither of them truly gains. The higher level student is often working below his or her capabilities, and the lower level student merely copies or imitates without really developing needed language skills. Another strategy is to use flexible groupings rather than fixed groupings. Students do not have to know that you're differentiating, and it can be stigmatizing if teachers consistently place the same students together for instructions. Sometimes you'll see in the classroom, teachers call this the high group or the low group, which can be quite stigmatizing. It's important to purposely vary the group configurations regularly so that English language learners have the opportunity to interact with native English speaking students on appropriate tasks. Another strategy is to allow students to demonstrate their understanding of a concept in alternative ways, such as through a demonstration, a speech, a picture, or writing in their first language. It's important to also offer a choice of activities to let students it's important to offer a choice of activities to let students do the differentiating. Teachers can offer a simple option on a lesson activity, providing an opportunity for students to select an activity that they believe is the right level of challenge for them. And our last strategy is to adapt programs to enable students to be successful. And this may include some modifications to curriculum expectations or accommodations, which may include the use of bilingual dictionaries or extra time for completing tests. Teachers will check the ESL or ELD box on the provincial report card only when modifications have been made to curriculum expectations to address the language needs of language learners. And this is important to ensure that English language learners are accessing the required support that they need. An example of differentiating what you can do as an educator is shown within vocabulary. So vocabulary is a crucial area of focus because it has a strong relationship with both reading and listening comprehension. When speaking with students and teaching them new words, it is crucial to use clear and simple language. Teach the students essential vocabulary using a variety of supports like models, charts, pictures, diagrams, word charts, picture books, toys, posters, or banners. And to adhere to the multiple modalities of learning, research has identified that it is important to use real objects to teach vocabulary. Like bring in articles of clothing, bring in objects like leaves and acorns or fruits and vegetables. Other strategies to support English language learners is to create a word wall with the first language translations and have pictures to introduce and reinforce unit-specific vocabulary and teach students how to use it as a tool to increase understanding. You can also have students develop their own dictionary. A strategy to implement would be that students identify 4 new words they learned that week during a class or outside of the class that they think are important and write down the word definition in primary language, draw a picture, and use the word in the sentence, like in the picture on the slide. And maybe you could have that every Friday, the students share the 4 words they learned with a partner. And this can help deepen students' understandings. You can also support differentiation by providing visual aids. Using visual support provides a tremendous aid in comprehension and communication. When teaching English language learners, or anyone else of that matter, scaffolds such as photos and images only increase the odds of successful teaching and learning. They are a superior tool for differentiated instruction. English language learners can label objects, and advanced English language learners can answer more complex questions and write a story about it. Another visual support is graphic organizers. Graphic organizers during reading activity are defined as a strategy to help students learn new content knowledge. Graphic organizers are tools to visually organize information for students, to link fragments of information together. And we will dive more into supporting reading comprehension in the upcoming slides. How can we tailor instructional strategies to support English language learners' reading comprehension? Reading comprehension involves having students actively engage in reading and understanding texts. Reading comprehension has been reported to be the foundation for English learners' learning performance in other subject areas such as math and science. Poor reading comprehension can occur as a result of deficits in either decoding, linguistic comprehension, or both. Preliminary evidence suggests that English language learners, poor comprehenders, demonstrate persistent difficulties in oral language, metalinguistic, and cognitive skills, such as vocabulary, morphological awareness, syntactic awareness, listening comprehension, and working memory, as well as higher level skills, such as inference and reading strategies. As educators, it is important to scaffold learning to support reading comprehension of English language learners. Researchers have confirmed that prior knowledge is a significant predictor of text comprehension, and students with more prior knowledge of a topic are better able to comprehend. The activation of students' prior knowledge is considered a pre-reading activity, which can provide text-specific knowledge, pre-reading, teaching vocabulary, or pre-questioning. When doing a read aloud, begin with previewing, which is paging through a text ahead of time to look at pictures or headings, which can begin to activate prior knowledge that helps the reader to both decode words and make meaning of the text. English language learners may not bring the same kinds of background to a text as other students. For example, they may not be familiar with the once upon a time and they lived happily ever after story structure for a fairy tale. They may know a lot about maybe an Indian snack pani puri, but maybe nothing about crackers. So taking the time to help students build background knowledge is essential. As educators, you can support English language learners by providing leveled questions during reading activities. Leveled questions are defined as a strategy to help students comprehend new content knowledge. By using meaningful questions in class can lead students to a higher level of comprehension of learning materials. So you can support English language learners' reading comprehension by reading sentences at a slow to normal speed using an expressive tone. Allow time after each sentence or paragraph for students to assimilate the material. Point to the words in the text as you read them. This is particularly useful for students who need to learn the left to right flow of English texts, as in some languages, they read from right to left. You can support English language learners' reading comprehension by pointing to the corresponding pictures as you read the text, acting out the story as you read and ask students to act along with you. It's also important to use visuals and manipulatives such as a flannel board, pieces, props, and puppets. Oh, pardon me. Let me fix that. A little technical difficulty. There we go. Okay. So verify comprehension of the story by asking students to point to items in the illustration. That's another way that you can support reading comprehension. And check for comprehension with yes and no, or either or questions at first, and then move on to maybe fill in the blank, or who, what, when, where, why, and how questions when students are more comfortable. It's also important to support reading comprehension, and how you can do this is by pausing at strategic points and invite students to supply the words or phrases they know. When students are familiar with the story, invite them to read along with you as you point to the words. And if appropriate for younger students, use big books, as both text and illustrations can be easily seen. Next, we're going to talk about the integration of culturally responsive materials and background knowledge. As educators, it is our job to not only respond to the diversity of languages and cultures in our classroom, but also aim to sustain these elements at the center of teaching and learning. In order to support our English language learners, we must get to know them. This doesn't mean doing interrogations on the first day of school. It means building positive relationships with our students so they feel a sense of sharing. They feel safe to share their experiences with us. It involves daily interactions with students about their struggles, their joys, and their goals. Getting to know our English language learners may involve making time to learn about their home countries, the conflicts that may be going on there, their cities or towns they come from, and the languages they speak. When developing instruction and learning activities, it's important to build on the cultural experiences to create the language learning opportunities. These include lessons in which students have made presentations about their home cultures. In the classroom, you can have students read books that serve as a mirror rather than as a window. By having books that are reflective of students' own culture and experiences, they may be more engaged and motivated to learn. The integration of culturally responsive materials and background knowledge is a method to activate prior knowledge and provides English language learners with the opportunity to connect their cultural experiences and vocabulary to words in English. Another method to support English language learners is through interactive and collaborative environments. Children cannot learn to speak English without opportunities to practice speaking English. Providing students with these opportunities to interact with other students will naturally enhance English language learners' development in English, while also providing the scaffolding needed to help English language learners achieve in the content areas. One thing you could do is in the classroom is create pairs or small groups where English language learners can try conversational role play, such as using please, thank you, and resolving conflict with others. This is not only beneficial for English language learners, but for all students to acquire this knowledge. Studies have shown that cooperative learning has a positive effect on English language learners. Cooperative learning gives English language learners extensive daily opportunities to use their developing language skills in meaningful contexts. In particular, cooperative learning appears to be able to build confidence in the use of school-specific English of the kind students are unlikely to hear on the playground in their communities. And last, we have some concluding thoughts. This webinar has focused on a variety of instructional strategies to support English language learners' language acquisition and proficiency. I have highlighted the variety of differentiated instructional strategies and techniques in regards to focusing on vocabulary development and the use of visual aids to support English comprehension. Scaffolded learning was discussed in regards to activating prior knowledge during the read-alouds and prompting students with questions to support and monitor comprehension. The integration of culturally responsive materials and backgrounds was also discussed as a method to activate prior knowledge and provides them an opportunity to connect their cultural experiences and vocabulary to words in English. Finally, I discussed how creating interactive and collaborative learning environments supporting English language learners' comprehension as they practice their language skills. Considering the variety of strategies to support English language learners' acquisition and proficiency, it is your duty as an educator to ensure that all students, including English language learners, receive equitable support to succeed academically. Thank you.